Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine, and we are here for EdD in Progress, Strengths and Self-Analysis. So today we are going to be focusing on two main objectives here. First, we are going to be delving into Leadership 714's Week 3 Strengths-Based Leadership Analysis assignment. And then we're also going to delve into how to write about yourself and your test results in APA style. And these are intricately linked, because this is one of those assignments where you really need to talk about your strengths, your experiences, and your plans for yourself based on an assessment that you've taken. And this is something that some students have a lot of experience with because of their particular academic background, and that some students are very uncomfortable about, again, because of their particular academic background. When I was an undergraduate, the APA style in effect was APA 5th edition, which with the goal of sounding scientific, rigorous, objective, they told students and other writers not to use personal pronouns like I, me, my statements. And then they discovered that, well, actually, there were some cases where it was just needlessly confusing to write about someone who looked a lot like you, but you wouldn't say was you. Things like, no, researcher did this, or the student will find that. And it just became clear that so long as you exercised reasonable restraint, that there was nothing wrong with saying, I did this, or my results were X. And so that's where we find ourselves in APA 7th edition. And so we'll talk about how to write about yourself in APA style coming up. All right, so let's talk about the Leadership 714 assignment for this week. So this particular assignment asks that you take the StrengthsFinder survey. Now, if you have the course textbook, you'll see that it calls things StrengthsFinder 2.0, and that when you go to the website, that some things may be labeled a little different. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. But if you open up the link from the textbook and you say, but wait, I'm not seeing the exact name, don't worry, they've just updated the website since then. So the StrengthsFinder assessment has been used quite a bit in educational leadership. When I taught at Azusa Pacific University in their EdD program, and when I taught at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga in their EdD program, they use this too. It's one of those things that has become very popular in leadership circles and is the basis for a lot of dialogue between different people who are collaborating and wanting to let others know, here's how to work with me best, or here's something that I'm working on and appreciate some input on that. So the first step is to go ahead and take the survey and identify your top 5 strengths. I usually recommend that students write these down on a piece of paper. You can save the output as a PDF, but if you write it down for a note, you'll be referring to this a lot when you're writing the assignment. Once you've taken the assessment, it's helpful to then go and read the part of the text that is specifically about these strengths that you've been evaluated on and understand what the test is suggesting to you about your top 5 strengths and what this means. Of course, you want to watch the videos. They have a lot of supplemental detail. But the assignment itself, the main product that you're turning in, is a critical analysis of your strengths. This is why we have that other section about how to write about you. And for this paper, 3 to 5 pages for the body of it, not counting the cover, not counting the references. Your paper must have synthesis, where you synthesize the course readings and resources, demonstrating a solid understanding of current strengths-based research. And the strengths analysis part, which is going to be by far the larger portion of this assignment, where you analyze your top 5 strengths as indicated by StrengthsFinder, include a definition of the strengths, going through each 5, and talk about what makes it unique, and whether you agree or disagree with the accuracy of the results. There are all sorts of people going through the program who have different strengths. It's not at all homogeneous. And there are are many people who happen to disagree with the strengths that are indicated as their top 5 strengths. And that's not a problem. You just want to explain why you disagree and what you might suggest or might have expected yourself. And sometimes it comes down to how you interpret the questions. But tell us those things. Do you disagree or agree with this, and why? All right. You also need to do an assessment of how this might help you understand your unique talents with specific examples. Most people will talk about work, either their job that pays them or something that they view as more as, oh, this is my calling or vocation. And because they feel that this is a major part of their life, that they'd be looking to apply that. But some students choose to write about relationships and family, which is certainly fine. There's lots of areas where you need strengths in the family. All right, next up, discuss how you see these strengths demonstrated in your personal and professional life. So this is going into some detail, again, grounded in examples. Also, what is an area that you see this being useful or being exercised? And again, if you disagree with some of the top 5, at the end of the day, it's a helpful suggestion about where your strengths might be, but there might be things that it didn't ask about that would tip the scales towards some others. So tell us about how the strengths you believe are your greatest ones are demonstrated in your life. An important one that people often skip because they aren't used to writing about this: create a plan for developing your strengths and using them in new ways. And some of this can be related to why you are in this program. I know very few students who come to complete a doctorate in education because they want to keep doing exactly what they're doing right now. Usually there's something where there is a position that they are preparing themselves for, or responsibilities that they are looking to undertake or do better. So presumably your enrolling in this program is a step towards that. So how are your strengths, the top 5 and otherwise? How do you want to develop them to help do the things that you want to do next, whatever that should be? And then there's a specific suggestion to look in the Wrath text at the ideas for action if you are a little short on ideas. That's certainly a fine way to go. And you can also look towards module 7 for some ideas for things that you might write about. Additional instructions: format this according to APA style, have references and citations. And for a number of reasons, this is an assignment where the faculty have chosen to stress they want paragraphs that tell strong arguments. That you advance a main idea in your topic sentence, that you follow it with evidence and analysis, and that you flow from one paragraph into the other, connected arguments and statements. If we look at the rubric, it is pretty much just the things that were mentioned. Again, make sure to include that plan for developing and using new strengths. Make sure that you have these sections sorted. I would recommend having subheadings for these to make it clear to yourself and to your reader that you've done all these things. And that's pretty much it. So let's switch gears here and move into how to write about yourself and your test results in APA style. So we're probably going to be citing the test because you're taking the test, you're going to be talking about your test results. So that's something that's going to come up. And if we look at the website, in fact, let's go ahead and do that now. Let's just talk about the different places that you might gather your information here. So one moment as I switch the share. All right, so here on the Gallup website. So Gallup is the corporate author that's here in the upper left-hand corner. The title of the webpage is Clifton Strengths. Live your best life using your strengths. It's just a label on part of the content on this page. So as you can see, this is being taken by a lot of people, and it's always growing, and that they have these video explanations of different strengths, and they have that for the complete set. So if you were just citing the test, you would cite this page as you saw the example here. If you were going for a particular subpage here, let's say we were looking at one of the themes here. Well, let's say that you chose intellection as one of your strengths that you want to discuss. So going to this particular page here, what is the title of this web page? It's an introduction to the Intellection Clifton Strengths theme. Now, Gallup is still our corporate author here. For writing out the title here, just keep in mind that the titles are normally given of a web page are normally given in sentence case, but intellection and Clifton Strengths, those are both proper nouns, so make sure that you capitalize them accordingly. You'd have the link here that you'd include. And if we look on this page, we'll see there is not a last updated on this date thing. So instead of having a publication year like 2011, we would have N period D period, which stands for the Latin phrase non datum, not dated. So if you're on a web page and there is not a clear date where they say, oh, this was updated or published on this date, then just use N period D period. If you end up having more than one definition page that you're citing, then you'll have N period D period dash A dash B dash C. More on that in a little bit. So with the other things besides the test that you're going to be potentially citing and referencing, it's helpful to ask some questions like, are these sources of information published and available to the public? And if they are, you're going to want to cite and reference them. If it's not published in private, you'll refer to it in the body of your sentence, but not include a citation. And this example that I included because this is an area where people often get confused. So my Clifton Strengths, Gallup ND, results showed that. So the Clifton Strengths and the parenthetical citation, that is identifying the tests that you took. The results themselves don't have a citation because no one can just go and look up your test results. Those are private to you. And then again, if you're referring to the test itself, Gallup is the author, the corporate author, and because there's no data on the page, N period, D period. Clifton Strengths with that odd capitalization in the middle, because it is a proper noun, we keep that. So I alluded to some renaming. So this is something that confuses people because every now and then they will rename the survey and the product. So the old name was Clifton StrengthsFinder, Clifton being the person who created the original StrengthsFinder tool, and then he licensed it to Gallup, which is then hired other people to update and expand it. And their current branding name, their current marketing name for it is Clifton Strengths, capital C, capital S, no space in the middle. The original StrengthsFinder or StrengthsFinder 1.0 was the version that was introduced in 1999. StrengthsFinder 2.0, which is the one that you'll take under the name Clifton Strengths, is the updated version that came out in 2007. And it is referred to in the course materials as StrengthsFinder 2.0 because this is a relatively recent rebranding by Gallup. So how might you write about your test results? Well, just because you have those 36 strengths doesn't mean that there's no relation between them. There are the 4 domains that they're clustered into. And so one way to talk about them is to mention which ones are in what domain and if there are any trends that you feel this conveys. So for example, if none of your strengths fell into a particular domain that might be something you want to talk about, or if most of them are in a particular area, or you have two in another area, that might be something you want to talk about with phrases like, several of my top 5 strengths are in the domain of strategic thinking, which aligns with my lifelong interest in planning things out and my desire to move into a superintendent role where I can be involved in large-scale planning. For example, you might also use a phrase like, oh, I plan to work to improve this strength here by doing such and such a thing. Or my top 5 strengths are these things. You'll almost certainly be using a sentence like that to list them out. I was surprised that this strength was or wasn't listed. And again, you can disagree with the results. Now, if you are stating an action that you have done, of course, it's appropriate to use an I statement because that's the most concise way of letting people know you did that. Some other examples here that might be helpful. And when you're talking about your plan, usually you'll start the paragraph out with a sentence, I plan to do this and that. And then in the following sentences, because you've already stated that you are the person doing this plan, you don't need to have that particular phrasing in the follow-ups. You can have sentence like, according to this plan, blah. Or the second step in this plan is to this other thing. So that finishes our slide portion. We have some time so that we're going to go ahead and look at some of the outlining because this is something I frequently get questions about. You are more than welcome to ask questions as I go through this. And as I'm setting up, you can just type it in the chat room or you can send me a direct message. Happy to answer any questions there. All right, I'm going to grab a copy of our course paper template. Keep these, you can download it from the Writing Center website. You can download it from Canvas. It saves a lot of time on the formatting and the setup because you have things like the margins and styles built in and ready. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up and share my screen. And we'll talk about how the assignment instructions indicate this should be laid out. All right, so I've downloaded a blank copy of the template. It just has some instructions and things like that. And I want to clear those out because I've already read those instructions. So first thing I'm going to do here, if you go to a comment here in the review tab, you can select delete and delete all comments in the document. And great, those are all gone. We're not required to write an abstract for this paper, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that page. And don't need this placeholder text, so just going to go ahead and delete all this. And I'll delete the placeholder references as well. All right, so we have blank paper. Let's get started. So in the background, I'm going to be looking at the instructions for this assignment. And if you like, you can load up the module on your own computer and follow along on that. For simplicity and pacing, I am going to not be switching back. I'll just keep my screen share. All right, so the first line for the instruction says, write a 3 to 5 page critical analysis of your strengths. And so I'm going to start with a title that clearly says I'm doing that. Is it a fancy title? No, but it doesn't have to be. It just needs to be informative and reasonably concise. All right, so I'm going to have some sort of introduction here. We don't put a heading for introduction in APA style because if it's the very first section in a paper or a chapter, it's obvious from the placement, it's the introduction. So having a heading there would be considered redundant. So we don't. All right, now looking at the instructions is, oh, part 1 synthesis. Okay. And then part 2 strengths analysis. And then it's not stated in the outline, but in general, you usually want to have a conclusion. So I'm going to put that in here. All right, so how should these be formatted? Well, this is going to be the first heading, and these should be on the same level. So these should all be APA level 1 headings. So I go to the home part, and because this is a template, I see some styles here that I can just use immediately. I can also open the styles pane here, and I'm going to make those APA level 1 headings. You see how they automatically became bolded and centered, because that's what an APA level 1 heading looks like. All right, now if I just hit enter, it'll start me off in a regular paragraph. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the content here. And in fact, I'm going to just go ahead and start out. I'm going to paste the specific instructions here, so I know I have it, and I will be taking care of exactly the things that I'm asked to do. So as it happens, the instructions lay out these 3 bullets for what should be done. So some of these are going to be just a paragraph, some of them will be a little longer, but it's enough of a separation and that it's a good idea to add a heading for this, to mark this as a subsection. So analyze your top 5 strengths. All right, well, I'm going to call that my top 5 strengths. And in this case, because this is underneath a level 1 heading, it's a subheading of the strengths analysis section, we're going to use the APA level 2 style. And you can see how that gets moved flush left and bolded. Great. Now the next section, okay, how does this information help you better understand your unique talents? All right. Now I can always go through and create more interesting detailed headings later, but I don't need to. So long as the heading is accurate and helpful, that's not a problem. If it's a little on the boring side. All right. And I'm going to call this next one applying my top 5 strengths. And I want this to be a level 2 heading as well. You see it even got rid of the bullet for me. So now I have laid out the main things that I'm going to be writing about. And the instructions, how long should this be? Well, this is only going to be 3 to 5 pages. So this is probably not going to take more than a short paragraph here. Maybe 2. And so that's like a page maximum. And then each of these is going to be at least a paragraph on its own, probably 2. So that'll get us to around 2 pages. And then throw in an intro and a conclusion, that's around 3. So if you do each of these for about a paragraph, you'll be at around the minimum for this. So there's room to write a little bit more, but don't spend too much time. I'd say start out doing exactly what you're asked to do. And if you have more space, you can always add more detail. But if you're meeting the requirements for this, great. All right, so how would you go about writing this? Okay, well, in order to analyze your top 5 strengths, you probably need to start out by listing them. And then this is going to be a case where we want to be specific about what we're referring to. Well, it was called StrengthsFinder 2.0. Now it's just called Clifton Strengths. And then because I'm referring to that specific one, I'm going to have Gallup M period D period. Now let's go ahead and look at how that might develop if I'm citing other resources from the Gallup website. So just to start us off, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste in the entry for the test itself. But what happens if I have another resource that I want to cite here? Let's go back to our web browser. Let's say that I want to cite this page about the intellection theme or strength. They use the words interchangeably. Well, I'm going to need that link. I'm going to need the title here, and the rest should be pretty much the same. All right, so if we head back to the Word document, well, all right, I'll go ahead and start out Gallup. It's also going to be NPD period. And then I need the name here, and that's going to be an introduction to the Intellection Clifton Strengths theme. We italicize the page title. We convert this to sentence case, which means that these words will be lowercase, but because these are proper nouns, they stay as they are. And now we have a problem, because if we were citing this in APA style, we would end up with Gallup N period D period for both of them. And that's confusing. So there is an extra step when you have more than one source from the same author or set of authors published in the same year, or in this case, lacking a publication year. So in this case, we sort them alphabetically by title. So A goes before C, so that's the first one. And then go ahead and we add -A for the first one, -B, and if we had another one after that, it'd be -C. And so in place of the year, when you're doing a parenthetical citation, you just include that there. Because of this potential for confusion, I recommend that before you develop your outline further, that you clarify how you're going to cite different sources, because otherwise you can get confused. So let's do a couple more there. Let us say that I am going to look at the empathy theme. So, all right, same deal. I can even kind of start with a lot of the stuff here, because it's going to have the same corporate author. And then I just go ahead and I replace the link. Empathy. And then this is going to be the empathy theme instead of intellection. And don't worry about the lettering until we have all of them in here. All right, so let's say that relator is another one that I'm going to put in. Great. So just going to paste this a couple times because I know I'm going to have 5 themes. Relator. And let's say arranger, one of the executing domains. Well, if you're wondering why the R symbol isn't italicized, it's because the font doesn't have a version for that. That's why it looks a little bit odd there. All right, so we have arranger, empathy, intellection for later. We need one more theme here. Let us say that maximizer was the last one here on this list. All right, so we have our 5 introductions and 6 source by the same author. So now we go ahead and say, okay, well, these are the only ones I'm going to be talking about, so that we just letter them in descending order. So we go down, we go up in the alphabet. So if I was going to cite this one, it would be Gallup N period D period dash A. I'm going to do this one, Gallup, comma, N period D period dash D. You get the idea. So that is the area that people have the most confusion with, just because it's involving the same author and pages that don't have a publication year. Now, let's look at something that comes up in the course. So let's say that we were looking for citing a particular source that's in the course readings, because after all, you are synthesizing things. Well, let's take a look at the syllabus for the course. All right, so looking at this, we have our outcomes, all that stuff. And what are we reading this week? Well, we've got the stuff related to StrengthsFinder, and we have these different resources here. So can you refer back to Bradbury and Greaves? Absolutely. Can you draw on the Rath source text? Absolutely. So if you are citing any of these sources, the thing that I must emphasize is that these citations are not, or are not all, in APA 7th edition. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these into the Word document to show you what would be involved in changing those up. For the moment, I'm just going to paste these at the top. We'll rearrange them in a moment. All right, so this first one here, let me get that share going. So this first source is not quite right. So this text is basically as it was when I copy and pasted it. What it's missing is the publisher. And when the publisher is the same thing as the author, you just put author at the end, and that's it. Now, this next source, as it appeared when we copied and pasted it, looked like this. So you can see self-leadership. This is all capitalized in title case. Well, in APA style, in your references list, you want to capitalize the title of a book in your references in sentence case. If you're wondering why, it's because they privilege journal articles as being the most current scholarship. So journal titles get title case, but book titles get sentence case. So we just changed that. You also, starting with APA 7th edition, this is a change from APA 6, you don't include the city and state, and you don't include the ISBN. Now, the ISBN is helpful to have in the syllabus because that helps you ensure you're ordering the right textbook, but we don't want it in our reference list. All right, so that's the NEC source, and we want to alphabetize this, of course. All right, so the Bradbury book, let's go ahead and move that up here. All right, so we have 2 authors here. We need a comma before that ampersand. We need a period after the publication year. And then this is the title of the book. So we're going to italicize that. We need a period after that. No publisher, location, just the name of the publisher. And then, of course, no ISBN and no note there. So cross that out. The last one we're left with is Rath StrengthsFinder 2.0 book. So we want to italicize that title. This is a proper noun, so it stays the same. Get rid of the city and state. And there we go. So the next step that you'd want to do, again, this is before you start the writing, to organize your references, is move these in so that these are all alphabetized by author. So of course, Nick and Rath, those sources will go after the Gallup things. Because you know that you're going to be discussing some of these sources going into the assignment, that's a good time to put them in now. You can even put in notes about citing them in your outline. But the real important thing is if you are citing anything off the Gallup website, put those in before you start writing, or else you'll have to go in and keep changing. Like, well, I cited that other one. Now I need to go and change that from D to E. And then change one of those E to F and so on and so forth. So it's a big time saver to do that now. This concludes our main plan presentation. If you have additional questions, you're more than welcome to ask them now, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording